It's showtime. Hello, everybody. It's showtime. Welcome to another episode of with me, Jeffrey Platt from Ahead of the Curve. Today, I've got a really interesting guest directly from the UK, my good friend Lewis Kyle White, who is a absolute genius with all kinds of different devices and working with different types of communication protocols and working on a multitude of different live events from basically all over the world. So just to give you guys a little blurb, as I do every week about Ahead of the Curve, I kind of created this in the midst of our chaos called COVID-19 in the life we're all living in now. And I wanted to create something where we can engage as a community and kind of do some education and bring on some really interesting speakers talking about different topics each week from a multitude of different industries. So let's dive right in. Kyle, welcome, man. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
It's good to be here. Would you mind giving us a little bit of a background of who you are, where you're from, how you started getting into this crazy stuff?
I mean, on the short story or the long story?
Let's do it short.
Well, currently I'm the creative director of Stout Studio. I work as Pixels and Noise on a lot of tour visuals, and basically just a creative director. I do a lot of content, interactive stuff. I do a lot of kind of system design as well, like putting shows together, like finding ways to get interactive shows to work as well. So just dipping in and out of a lot of places. I mean, my background's mostly in motion graphics, animation, like directing, kind of classically trained in that sort of sense, but now moving over into digital is still visual. It's just very different.
Is that where you started? Like, do you have any formal education in motion graphics or broadcast?
Not particularly in broadcast, but started out doing graphic design. So I've got a very strong design language that I always try and implement in stuff. And I get quite insistent on doing things right. If you're using a font wrong, I get quite upset.
So how did you start getting into the position of motion graphics to like tinkering with these different devices and getting into like a little bit of coding and learning about these different abilities to control media? Like what kind of instigated that and made you dive into it?
I think it's just been like a long time fascination with technology and like always wanting to know how something works and taking it apart and rebuilding it. A lot of kind of more linear based content, you don't really necessarily get to solve many problems. You're just making a storyboard come to life, or you're filming a artist, or if you get to create the content yourself from scratch and you've got to find out ways to create that content, you can build tools to do that. And that is where I started like leaning towards, and it was getting a bit more crafty, a bit more hands-on. I was like, I need to build the tool to make that camera do the thing I want to do, like even motion control, but on a very small scale. You build your own motion control rig, or you find a way to move something in a certain way. So that's where it started really. And then it's just sort of progressed as I've got more and more exposed to certain industries. So I've ended up in the live world a lot, doing tour visuals, obviously, and also in the events world, doing interactive installations and various other things.
Very cool. So did you play with a lot of Lego when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. As I think we all did. I remember working with my dad on like electronics. My dad was an electrical engineer, and I remember him bringing these different things at home and us just disassembling them and taking them apart to try and fix something and then put them together. And we always had a big pile of parts left over at the end,
Yeah, true.
It seemed to still miraculously work for the most part, but we'd always end up with different bits and pieces kind of scattered all over the place.
Lego was a good training ground for a lot of this stuff. You'd get a box when it would have a picture on the front and it would say build a car, and then you'd end up building like a robot arm with it. And
how far down the rabbit hole do we want to go?
Yeah. No, it's a good start into all of this stuff. I mean, it still kind of is. It's about building blocks and looking at things and putting them together in different ways.
So how about we talk about some of these building blocks?
Yeah, sure.
I noticed in the slide there's a few different things. We've got a little bit of a presentation for everybody joining. And I just wanted to say hi to everybody. Thank you guys again so much for your support and joining us today. So again, feel free to post comments in the comment box. And if you guys have any questions at any time, please post away, and we'll gladly try and engage with you and answer questions. And I just want to, just post away. So, Lewis, I'm going to actually jump and bring up a layout with the presentation, with your slide deck, so that we can just kind of jump in and talk about a few different things that you have in here.
Sure. Do you want me to just start going through?
Yeah. So
as I was saying, this is my background. I've done a lot of various things. I've been called a lot of things, from director to animator, all that other stuff. So as I'd say, I work as Pixels and Noise. I am the creative director of Stout Studio, and also still do have work that I put out as an individual. So I have another website for that, so you can check those out. Feel free to do that. And a lot of what I want to talk about today, I guess, is sort of what I call the secret sauce. It's the kind of the glue of a lot of the projects that I've worked on. Like, when we're making things, we often have to quickly prototype and then figure out how to plug some technology into some other technology. And I've pretty much found by accident that Maximus P is sort of there as a toolkit that I always need. I didn't actually initially know what it was. It was only a couple of years ago I kind of fell into it, but it's become quite like a strong tool now that I use for everything.
Yeah, I find it's actually very heavily used as well in the digital art scene, and tinkering around with like a lot of interactive development. MaxMXP seems to be really a strong way to go, and a very, very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think it's overlooked quite a lot, actually, because a lot of audio people use it, obviously, but within the live events industry, it's just as useful. There's so much stuff it can do.
So I'm wondering, actually, if anybody viewing has experience as well in using it, MaxMXP. It'd be great to hear some of your feedback as well on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
but yeah,
I know a lot of people, like within the spheres of people I interact with, use Touch Designer for all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I love Touch Designer and what it can do, but I have such an aggressive, I don't like the interface. I can't deal with it. I just get a headache looking at it. So it pretty much can do everything we're going to talk about, but I still, for some reason, I just lean towards Max. It's just simpler, it's lighter, it's easier to understand for me.
I think it's also, to each in their own. A lot of people, yeah, Thomas, absolutely. I think to each in our own, it's all about workflow as well, and finding a workflow that works best for you as a creator. Yes. And as a tinkerer, I know a lot of my friends as well, and a lot of people I've worked with also rely very heavily on Touch Designer. But
yeah, I mean, they're both amazing toolkits, and I to be fair, I've worked on projects recently with both of them. I just tend to lean towards Max when it's me in charge. So, I mean, Max is a toolkit, like we say, and you can solve problems in it. But I started out on this route and this road, actually solving problems in Cinema 4D, and this is what we're looking at right now as an example of that. Is I needed to build a previs, I needed some rigs, some lights, so I started investing a bit of time in what I needed. So the next project down the line, I already had the toolkit, and I mean, I started out with just a light, and I ended up with this really complex espresso kind of node graph for making projectors. And it was a whole plugin now. It's all of a sudden, it's not just, oh, I've built a little rig. It's now a fully fledged plugin. You can click on buttons and switch things out and get lux calculations out of it. And it all just came out of the fact that someone on a project asked me, can you work out how big that image needs to be on the wall? And then someone the next project asks you, can you work out the lux of that image on the wall? And you just start tinkering. You're like, okay, how do I do that? How do I do that? And it builds into the next project, the next toolkit. And I quickly realized that that's something that I need to do, but maybe cinema is not the best environment to be doing it in, because you hit limitations quite quickly. And in fact, that espresso and coffee language is completely dead now as of R21. I can't even use this plugin anymore unless I have an old version of the software.
I think that's the way that it goes with technology. It's definitely a trend, right?
Oh, it's happened to me too often. I mean, I spent a lot of time doing Flash and learned action scripts, and then overnight it just got deleted because Steve Jobs doesn't like it.
The influencers of our day.
Yeah. So yeah,
I think we're going back to like the whole Lego block mentality, where you start with some sort of concept or application as to where you want to get to. You build that simple application to do that one thing, and then you just build on it and build on it and build on it until next thing you know, you've got a full-fledged, basically, application.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, some of these examples that I want to show today are just like, literally, they are just roadmaps of that. They started out with, okay, we want to make this thing. How do we do it? And then they ended up with, oh, we've got a solution that we can now sell to the next project, and then we can build on it and then turn it into a product. And I mean, this next project, the exercise in vulnerability, is what we launched Stout Studio with. And it started out as, I had a leap motion and I was playing with it. As you do, you get it, you don't know what to do with it. You plug it in, you load the SDK up, and like, okay, how can I use this cool little gadget? And we built an entire art installation around it. Essentially, it was the main interaction. You walked into a space, you waved your hand around in the air, and the whole presence of waving your hand is you had to open up to the experience, and it was about vulnerability. And the more you opened up, the more you raised your hand, the more you would see that there was someone else in the room with you, but they were doing the same thing back at you. So it was this whole like experience of two people reaching towards each other, and basically the leap motion was at the core of it. And you know, we had to build this infrastructure ourselves based around this piece of technology that really is made for something that, you know, like VR potentially, or, you know, I'm not entirely sure what leap motion was made for really anymore.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure as to what. I think it was just a fun little prototyping tool when gestures were a big thing and Connect was kind of phasing out and people were trying to find new solutions. So, you know, Leap came out with this kind of neat way to be able to measure velocity and you know, basically hand gestures and gesture-based actions. So I think they were just trying to maybe just bridge the gap, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's turned into a really strong, like, kiosk-based interface. Like, if you want to build a interactive show for someone, and you need a way to interact with it, it's got the smallest learning curve of any interface. You know, it's quicker than a touch display. You literally just wave your hand in front of it. All you have to do is give someone some visual indication of what they're doing, and they can learn it very quickly. So, I mean, here's an example of like how we started building this thing. Like, we literally, it started with a sketch, like, what do we need to do? This particular show, we also had a galvanic skin sensor, which took your, it's like a lie detector, essentially.
That's scary.
Yeah. I mean, it takes like an electronic reading from your skin and then like gives you a variable kind of frequency, which you can use. And depending on if you hold your breath or things like that, you could actually get a response from it. So we use that as an input from the person using our leap motion on one hand, and the other hand they had in their leap. But I mean, just to build this little box here that we kind of this whole platform, you know, it had a DMX dimmer in it. It has like a little Intel NUC in there running a max patch and running another app called Gecko. We had an NTech like DMX converter, so it's got its own ArcNet inside that little box.
Yeah, I saw the little NTech box down there.
Yeah, so essentially every time you put your hand in front of the leap, you needed like a visual representation, right? So the learning curve is so small if you see a light turn on when it's tracking you and you don't see a light when it's not tracking you. So, you know, those sort of things like they're just built straight in.
Out of curiosity, just for people to know, like what would be the cost on building something like that, to be able to prototype something like that? I mean, the NUCs are pretty, these days, you know, lightweight NUC is pretty cheap. The Arduinos are definitely super inexpensive. The Leap Motion itself is actually pretty cheap as well, right? So
yeah, I mean, I don't think one item in there is more than 200. I think the NTech box is probably the most expensive thing there. I mean, maybe the NUC. The NUC's about 400, maybe. It's a good one.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at, you know, about $1,000 US, roughly, give or take, probably.
Yeah, to get the whole box together, get it made, and, you know, make it into a product. But I was testing this stuff with just laptops and cables, and, you know, I had it working. It was just making it into something that could be put in an art installation, which is a different story.
Yeah, something that has to be a little more durable and something to last.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the galvanic skin detectors, like the thickness of the the gauge of the cable was important, because we're going to have so many people putting them on and off that the cable would get bent and snap. So we figured out we had to make a whole bunch of them, but we didn't make enough. I think we actually got down to our last sensor on the last day of the show, and it was open for like 8 hours a day for a week. So it was kind of cutting it fine at that point. Yeah, and then this show turned into an audio reactive show. So at the core of it, this is actually when I first kind of got my eyes clued into what Max is. We built a whole audio engine based on the output of the Leap Motion. So wherever you put your hand, it became like a pheromone, and it moved and it created synth sounds. So this is when I sort of started seeing the power of Max. I was like, we were just sending OSC data to this application. It was taking that and then reconstituting all the data, doing other things with it, controlling audio, and then sending out cues and commands to the D3. So depending on what you did with your hand, you could control the experience. And then obviously that all got sent to Notch content, which was dynamic as well and reacting to the OSC.
So did you conceptualize how did that whole process start? Did you just kind of come up with the idea of how things need to work? Was it collaborative? Was it a multitude of different ideas that were coming together from different people, or did you just kind of build it?
Yeah, this particular project was me, myself, so Pod, Lumen, and myself, Stout, and then we worked with an artist called Kate, and she helped us with the narrative and the kind of storytelling a little bit. But it was three of us basically just sat in a studio in Southwark in London, and we were just banging our heads up against this idea of vulnerability, and on the table at the time was a Leap Motion in the middle of all of it, and that's how it all got built around it.
You're like, hey, check this out. We can do something cool with it.
Essentially, and it ended up being a whole project. And the next thing was, okay, we're gonna put it into a commercial setting. So I've talked about this project enough now, but we did an interactive show for Aphex Twin, and at the core of it was the exact same plinth, the exact same infrastructure. But
well, there's something to be said about reusability for sure.
Yeah, well,
you've hit something really good when you can reuse it over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I said earlier about building rigs. Like, you invest time in one project and you invest it into the next project. And then this plinth that we've now built has been on multitude of jobs now. I mean, it's most famous for this Aphex Twin interaction, and where we took it around London, and we had two of them. So we had two different sites, and people could basically put their hand in front of it and play with the audio as well as play with the visual that was projected. And we did a load of cool stuff with it. Like this, because it was weird cool, he got really into it and he jumped on it. And he started, like, we were hiding messages in the OSC. So those streams of data there are actually part of the content. They're not just me prototyping OSC data. That's the content, and it's got a load of like the track names and things and little secret messages written in the OSC that was streaming off of the device.
Little Easter eggs, so to speak. Seeing as we just finished Easter,
Yeah. I just got a little video here. I just want to play of what the audio engine was. So
you might want to crank the volume up a little bit, maybe on your computer.
It's kind of hard to hear, but essentially it's like a pheromone. I mean, we've created like an instrument at this point. It was, I mean, you put your hand in, you got this like noise, and then as soon as you twisted your hand, you got a different noise, and it would pitch and arc and do all sorts of three-dimensional stuff. It was definitely cool.
Lewis, sorry, you just became very muffled all of a sudden as well.
Am I good? You still hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I was just saying, I mean, it became an instrument essentially at this point. We didn't expect to be building an instrument, but we had. And it was very successful. Almost too much so. We had to end up stripping all the audio engine back out and just play clips of Aphex Twin's music rather than stuff we'd self-generated, because it was apparently too far removed from the tracks. Because Richard had sent us samples and we'd built our entire audio engine based on his samples. So it was Aphex Twin inspired, but it was our own original music at this point. So we had
Yeah,
to
you
strip it
basically,
all.
as you mentioned, you built a full sampling engine and a musical instrument by the use of the Leap Motion.
Yeah. Yeah, and then eventually this turned into like a turnkey product. So like these plinths now live at the studio in a flight case, and anyone can hire them. All you have to do is plug them in, power, network, and they're ready to go. They spit out the OSC, and I can give like anyone a roadmap of what OSC does what, and it's now like we've put them on multiple of the jobs, and I don't even need much setup anymore. We can literally feel safe if someone just takes it, plugs it in, and it will do its job.
So
Yeah,
the disturbing facial image down there with your face completely changing, was that done in Notch's
yeah.
facial?
So this was the second iteration of the Aphex Twin interaction, and we wanted to like up the game a little bit this time around. So we decided to do something with face tracking, and yeah, it was all done in the inbuilt face tracking with Notch.
Very
and then
cool.
we just ran a live input from a Disguise server into the block and did the tracking with the predetermined data that you get. You get like a data set that it references. So it's essentially a 2D tracking. It's not really a 3-dimensional track, but it was good enough for what we wanted. So not only are you now waving your hand around to control the visuals, your facial like expressions also did stuff. So when people were they were kind of shocked and scared of it, they would put their hand in and dip it out and kind of laugh at it. But then as soon as they laughed, it would do something else. Yeah, it was quite a fun experience in the end.
So yeah, Zach says Notch Guru.
Oh yeah, no. So Zach's me and Zach have worked on Post Malone tour together. In fact, the Notch Guru is a bit of a joke from that tour. This ended up being something that I've now bought and used. But
that's usually the best way it happens, right?
Yeah.
Inside joke escalates. Next thing you know, it's a brand.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly just break these two experiences down that we were just talking about. Like, at the heart of both of them were Elite Motion, so we're playing with that device. But to get Elite Motion to do anything important or useful, we've found an app called Gecko that we make custom patches for, and then those patches then spit out very controlled OSC data. That OSC data we then send into the Macs. We can do various things with it. So in one case, we built an audio interface that did various sampling and a lot of things in Ableton as well. But also with an external, it can be controlling the lights. So eventually I had the DMX in the box, self-contained, doing its own interaction. So when you put your hand in and it tracks your hand, the DMX lights automatically turn on without a Disguise media server. So that's how I simplified the process and made it a turnkey product at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's kind of one of the ultimate objectives is to streamline that workflow and try and minimize the impact of failure from one thing to another as well. And I'm sure as you're prototyping, you're always trying to figure out kind of innovative and creative ways to be able to contain them and contain these different workflows and transmissions of protocol from one to another.
Yeah, I mean, our first version had we were sending OSC from one object to another. So the Gecko was running inside the plinth, and that was then sent to a Max that was working on a laptop. Then that was then sent to a switch into the Disguise media server, and then that was sending another network out to do the DMX. But in the second version, it's all contained on that NUC inside. It literally just spits out OSC to the server. So I have a whole ArcNet which is self-contained. The Disguise media server only needs one network input.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good way to do it. And just for those of you that are watching, I'm going to try at least afterwards, and I'm not going to try. I am going to post at least some links for you guys to be able to have at least kind of reference to be able to get to some of these different apps that we're talking about today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm going to skip over a lot of stuff. There's so many things that we mentioned. But yeah, I want to talk about a few other random kind of problems and just prototyping things. Like this was something that never came to fruition, but we were working on this Apple Beats project for Unit 9, and we started kind of trying to work out how to make a surfboard essentially that you stand on, and then you would be in an LED floor that was basically like surfing on pixels. So like
it's an awesome concept, actually. It's
pretty cool. I mean, it had 4 points of like 4 axis on it, so it was like a joypad. So if you leant left or leant right, we could get that data, and it was all built out of sensors that were stripped out of a household's digital scale. And then they were just like they're so simple, and then they were just plugged into an Arduino, and then that was hardwired into a network, and now we've got content that's dynamic to this piece of wood that you're standing on.
Yeah, I remember when I came to visit you, came to visit the UK back when we were actually able to socialize and engage with people.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Vaguely remember what
public. Yeah, and having a few pints and actually, kind of going over some of the projects and some of the things that you were working on. And I thought this was so simple yet so effective and just really cool, like really cool use of technology and just stuff that you can stuff that you can find around the house,
Yeah, I mean, literally, if you have an Arduino hanging around, you could strip the scales apart, get the sensors out, and you're good to go on this one. Just need a plank of wood. It was so simple, but so effective. And the other great thing about this, if it had come to light, is like the learning curve was really hardly any. You just, you could get a child to stand on it and they would know straight away what to do.
Yeah,
it's about exploring experiences and building these engaging things.
I think the other thing that people kind of get overwhelmed with too is just like a lot of people look at it and go, I don't know how to code. I don't really understand how to do scripting or stuff like that. And in a lot of cases, once you kind of get into it, it's fairly logical. And I know, like, dealing and tinkering around with the Arduinos, for me, I've been tinkering around with them for the past year or two now, and it's actually not that bad. Like, it's not nearly as overwhelming as people think it is. And I think that once, if you've got,
you probably know more than I do about them,
you can really kind of dig into it pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, I personally avoid coding. I'm a visual coder. I like plugging things in. That's why I like Max. It's all about nodes and plugging this into this and seeing what it does.
Yep.
Writing code, I've tried it before, but I failed to learn ActionScript 3, and anything beyond that, I was like, nope, can't be bothered. But like, I always invest time in figuring it out enough to be able to tell someone what I want them to do. And I think that's the sort of key thing to a lot of these projects.
Yeah, I would say I'm the same way. Like, I've always tinkered around with a lot of different things. And Isabel writes, not COBOL? Or did you not learn how to use COBOL? I mean, I hear that we can get jobs right now if you know how to use COBOL.
Really? I've never heard of that.
At least here in the US we can.
But, I mean, that extends to anything. Like this next project that I've got an example of here, this was one we did years ago when I was almost a couple of years old. But one of the first things I did with Notch, putting data into it via their web API. And like, I had no idea how to do this. I had to get Luke from Notch to do it for me, essentially. But we were dealing with technologies that I just didn't know how to use, but I knew what the end result needed to be, and I knew how I wanted it to look. So we just talked to the right people, and we got what we needed to happen. And the interesting on this one, we had MLB come down with their Doppler radar system. I had never seen a TrackMan Doppler radar system. How do we work with that? It's just like straight away toys, right? How do I play with this? How do I make it work?
I've got a new toy.
Yeah, I mean, it was great, but like the end result was just a scoreboard with some stuff on it. But what we had to go through to get it to work was kind of fun. It was a process. MLB had their own kind of technology, which was kind of closed off. So we ended up having to ping data to their servers, ping it back to our servers, aggregate it, ping it back to their servers. It's kind of a fun problem, and we had to do it all from a field on a 4G network. So yeah, stuff like that is just, it is all about tinkering and like trying to find ways to solve things. It's not necessarily an amazing project. I don't talk about it much, but I thought it was valid as like a, there's a strong use case there for the web API and Notch getting data in, and you can get data from anything if you process it. And this is why Max is so great. I can input a lot of things there, change what data format it's in, and send it out in a protocol I like. I'm just going to touch upon like Connects. I think we can't talk about
Yeah, I
gadgets
wanted to
without
talk
talking
about that
about
a
them.
little bit too, because we're starting to see another. We're starting to
Resurgence.
see. Pardon?
Another resurgence of Connects coming, isn't there? With the new one.
Yes, yeah, the resurgence of Connects and then coming back into the field. And I thought once I saw this part of your deck, I thought it was actually pretty interesting that we're starting to see that resurgence. But seeing what you tried to tackle here, those look like Connect version 1s, V1s.
So this project was trying to capture an entire band in real time on a stage in an award show. And we had 4 Connects, which was at the time the limit with V1s that you could put into a server. But we also built a system to use V2s and have an independent machine on each Connect so that we could then network them together. It was a big reach, and we learned a lot of lessons. The project actually got pulled last minute on stage and was a complete failure as far as getting to stage. It's the same with any of these award shows. There's a limited amount of time that you have there, and you have to really not trip up at all. I mean, I've just recently got off doing the Brits for Dave, and it was just a scary process. We were tracking real time on stage, on main stage. If we get that wrong, we're not gonna get to do the show. They're going to just sack it off 5 minutes before, and we end up with something that's our backup. I mean, we tried to use 4 Connects in a live environment, and we learned the lessons for it. They react differently to shiny surfaces, dynamic lights. The lighting really affected the frame rate of each camera. It was something that we tested it in a studio, and we were like, "Oh, great, it's going to work." Studio is completely static, sterile environment. And then you have like an hour on stage at an award show to try and make it work again, and we failed. We learned a lot of lessons from it, but I still think Connects are valuable and they're great devices. I've learned a lot from that particular job, and I've done successful stuff with them since, knowing what the limitations are.
I was just going to say, like, one of the interesting parts that you touched upon was just the fact of prototyping something in your space and everything working perfectly well, and then bringing it into a different environment and placing it there and going, oh shit, we didn't think about the lighting or how this was going to impact things and the reflections of different surfaces and all these different things that throw the sensors off. Because I know that, that's one of the big inherent problems that people also have even in a fixed installation space, is they're looking at it from a fixed installation point of view, and you're looking at these different products, and you're like, oh, this is going to really do really well, this is going to fit really well, and then all of a sudden you realize that there's a window and it's emitting a bunch of light into the space, and you've got a whole bunch of now infrared light that you didn't expect, and you're using an infrared sensor, for example, and everything is totally thrown off, So I think there's definitely something to be learned there for sure about keeping
Isabel's question on the range. If you bring my slide back up, it's probably a good point.
Yeah, of course.
So one of the things we did learn on this job was building rigs in Notch to be able to visualize the range and the field of view of each camera and each sensor was a very valuable tool. Because what I was trying to do was a volumetric capture of a band. So I needed to know what camera could see what part of the band. And without having this type of like rig, and this brings me all the way back to the first rig I built, it's like without having that rig, I wouldn't have known what I was doing in a 3D space. So we figured out by looking at the specs of the cameras what the fields of view were, what the depth range was, and I built that into this little rig that I've got here. And this rig's an invaluable tool now for me. Every time I use a Connect camera, it's the first thing I load up. It tells me what's going to be in the field of view and how deep that field of view is going to be.
Crazy question. Would that Notch project actually be shareable to the group?
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of this stuff I mean to share, and I say I'm going to share, and then I forget to do it. But loads of people have got this stuff. I think I've shared it on Facebook before, but yeah, if anyone wants it, welcome to get it off me.
There's a piece here that I wanted to talk about too, because I'm a big gamer, and I love playing retro video games, as you know, and tinker around video game systems. And I saw a part here where you had a 8-bit I/O gamepad patched in Max. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that one as well. Yeah.
So I've patched this thing before. It's like a Bluetooth kind of controller essentially. It also works over USB.
Yeah, they're again really affordable, like $30 roughly.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool object anyway. But like I was looking for a controller to do something, and I built a Max patch to take the human interface device, look at what buttons did what, like pushed everything, and then programmed that to be an OSC output. And then I was trying to, I think actually 2 days ago, I was trying to operate a Disguise XR camera with it, just to move it around in a viewport, just so I had a way of walking around with a remote to be able to move camera. And it's a really useful little tool. I think if we skip ahead in my slides, I can show you that patch. If you should bring the slide back up. I'll just talk us through. I mean, it's super easy because one of the strong things about Max is you can plug any like USB keyboard, mouse, anything in like that as a human interface device, and you can access it. So essentially all I do is just plug that in. You build a little menu system that allows you to select the thing that you want, because it will default to your trackpad or to your keyboard normally. And then you just route the cable, like the buttons out. So you push the buttons and log which button does what, and then you essentially rename them and send them back out to UDP. So I think on the right hand side there's like the human interface device numbers, and on the left hand side is the OSC that I'm spitting out from it.
Yeah, so you're just basically mapping the controller or mapping whatever device you want, and being able to map it and spit out whatever information you want through UDP or OSD or whatever protocol you want to use.
And the great thing about Max, in most cases, is you can cross-platform develop. So once you've built the presentation window, which is that like little one that looks more like an app, you can publish that to Windows or to Mac. I mean, I think with human interface devices, it's a little bit different because Windows doesn't allow you to access them, but for Mac, it's fine, and you can spit the OSC out into a network cross-platform anyway.
Yeah, Berto, of course, amazing stuff. And mentioning stuff about Max.
I loves Max.
I
know so he's been using it for a while.
We're kind of screaming down a railway towards the getting towards the end of our time. But I also wanted to talk to you before we kind of conclude about just stumbling across different technology and accidentally stumbling across different ideas. And before we jumped on live, we were talking a little bit about an app that you ended up building by complete accident. And I think that would be really interesting to touch on, kind of as the kind of conclude our session.
So should we jump ahead to that?
Yeah.
So I've been working. A lot of people probably know this, but I've been working in Notch, doing a lot of world tours for people. I'm working on the Post Malone tour, but we had to do a lot of stuff manually because it's the way we wanted that kind of organic look. So people were actually moving sliders to the beat. Zach, who was talking earlier, I had him back a house on his T-bar, shoving it up and down, getting the video input to the beat. It was a very hands-on show, and because of that, we had to build interfaces to do these things. Like video front of house doesn't normally exist. It's not really a thing. If it is a thing, at best, it's something like this. So a little MIDI controller that you can't really see. You've got a bit of tape next to it with your markings on it. It's not quite doing the job. And I quickly figured out that firstly, if I wanted to do this from front of house, I had to send a network protocol to back of house where all the kit is. So this was like the first version of this front of house. I've got my Notch machine there. I've got a little system running a Max patch. And in this particular job for Westlife that I did with Northhouse, I forgot the USB cable for the Korg Mini. So I've got all this equipment at front of house. I've got a network cable, and I can't control anything because I haven't got a USB cable. So while someone's scrabbling around trying to find me a USB cable, I was like, I've got an iPad. Okay, can I use Mira for Max to build an interface so I can touch it and move a slider? So while Harrison from Northhouse was running around mobile phone shops in Dublin trying to find me a cable, I built a Max patch and just developed a little app so that I could move a slider. And this quickly turned into something that I was like, actually, this is very useful. I could probably use this on another show. So this very quickly just turned into, okay, what other stuff can I control? So I went out and bought a load of MIDI devices and was like, okay, I like these buttons. I like this button. Oh, I can see these have got lights on. This is great. This is going to turn into something. And these are all the Max apps that I've now built. I've got one for every device, and it turns the MIDI into OSC, spits it out, goes to all the servers. I've got display modes, preference modes. I can have master and slave on, so I can have two people on the same network. Time code readouts and all sorts of stuff. They've got, this is what I call the show master, which is it has a full screen mode and it shows you. So you've got a little Korg Mini and you've got such a tiny little slider. This is now my whole screen, and I can see that increment change, and I can take screenshots of it if I need to save values and remember what I did on the show or a certain track. This also gets feedback from the servers. So on the right hand side there's the heartbeat coming back from the D3. There's the time code, the track number, the BPM. So I don't need to see the timeline of the server anymore. I can now get this front of house. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And it's basically turned into a whole product. I'm not really released it yet because I'm still developing it, but it's now, I've got it's got its own icon. It's got an own menu system where I can go in, and because I was thinking ahead, I wanted to custom build it so that it would work on multiple shows in multiple environments. So you can change all the settings from this one panel and then close it down like a proper application.
And I think that's the important thing too, is like, as we mentioned before and earlier, is if you have an idea that you can repurpose and reuse, there's a lot of, you can build on that and continue to build on that. There's,
I mean, it's turned into my own way of doing things now. Like, I mean, Notch video front of house, whatever you want to call it, is a bit of a unknown territory. It's been a bit like the Wild West out there at the moment, like the last couple of years. No one really knew what Notch was. No one really knew why video wanted to be front of house. I mean, I still get questioned every time I do a job. They're like, why do you want a network cable there? Because I need to see the screen. I need to control it. I need to grade it. And yeah, it's now part of my workflow. It's a very integral part. I have one machine that does the Notch networked in. I have a SDI feed that I have in a little Blackmagic that does my RGB separation so I can see the grading. And then I have another machine which is now just dedicated to this application that I've built, and it spits out the OSC and controls the whole show.
Yeah, that's awesome. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and I guess that just brings us to sort of summary of this, that you can build these. Like, I built all this in Maximus P. You could quite easily build it all in Touch Designer, I'm sure. But for me, like, just the easeability of Max has meant that I've spent a lot of time in it. And between Maximus P, Protocol, and Gecko, I've built a lot of these shows. A few of these other apps have helped me along the way, but it's mostly been the secret sources, Max and Gecko.
And you showed me ZigSim, because it was something I wasn't familiar with at all.
I don't think a lot of people will be familiar. It's an iOS app that is like, essentially it accesses all the stuff on your phone, like all the sensors, the gyroscope, and you can just spit out OSC. And it's even quicker than Max. If you wanted to just, like, I don't know, spin an object round in Notch and just have some sort of user interface, you don't even have to build that. You just ask that app what you want to output and send it over a network, and there you go. You've got OSC. Yeah,
and you can grab that, I think, for Google Play in the Google Play Store or in the App Store, and I know that there's a GitHub repository for it as well.
Yeah, I've used it for various little, like, testing things out before I even try and write something in Max, and then I end up building something more sophisticated that I have more control over. But yeah, these are the tools that I go to when I'm not working in the content software. It's like, this is all the stuff that glues it together.
So what's your favorite part? Do you have a favorite part? Is there a part where you prefer to work in the creative software side, or do you really enjoy working on the kind of the more prototyping and tinkering side? I know that's a loaded question, but
I mean, the creative direction at the end of the day is always the thing that I get locked into the most. I love setting these things up and figuring out how to do it, and then I employ people to do it properly. It's figure it out first and then let someone else run with it that's got more knowledge.
That's awesome. Well, Lewis, I want to thank you so much for being on with me today and kind of scratching the absolute minimal surface and giving people a little taste of what is out there and what's available. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on board with me today. We will do a little wrap up afterwards, do some Q&A, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining us again today, and please come back next week. I have my good friend Ginger Lee who's going to be on the show with me. She is a local digital artist and interactive developer here in Orlando. We're going to talk about the digital art scene in its current state. We're also going to talk about the abilities and possibilities of maybe bringing digital art and interactive art into an online environment and into more of a virtual setting. So we're going to explore a little bit of that next week. So guys, thanks again, and as always, stay ahead of the curve, keep everything up, and keep doing the amazing work. So thank you very much for joining us again today.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
So I just wanted to ask the group if there's any questions. If you guys have any Q&A or any questions that you want answered, we'd be very happy to pop those up now. Otherwise, we'll probably just wrap things up and jump off within the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone can contact me on Facebook. I'm active on the Notch user group quite a lot. So if you want to know anything or get involved in some of these things I've built, happily share.
How long, out of curiosity, the Mac, that basically custom Macs app? Thanks, Isabel. Yeah, my lovely wife did this, by the way. It actually didn't turn out too badly. We were doing a happy hour last Friday night with a bunch of friends on Zoom, and I thought it would be actually a lot of fun to get my hair cut by my amazing wife, because we can't have a hairdresser or haircut barber anymore.
Yeah, I'm hiding mine.
I don't know if this is like a leap of faith or whatever, but we were having a few drinks and sitting in front of friends, and we were out in our patio, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Hey, you want to give me a haircut?" And she's like, "What, now?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we went out and got some scissors, and this is it. Away we went.
Just to answer your question about the patch, though, it's taken years to get to where it is. I think it's I probably started building that Max patch 2 years ago. It's built and built and built. Every job you go, oh, I need this feature. Oh, it'd be cool if it did that. And then you have a conversation with someone, and then they share something with you. I've had a few friends that I've met over the time that have gone, oh, check this Max external out. This will do this thing. You better plug that in. And suddenly it just opens a whole new door to something else.
Yeah, I find that even working in the media server world and working in that space, once you start getting into development and developing your own applications and developing your own software, basically, you enter a rabbit hole that will just continue to go on forever, because you're going to end up getting features that you didn't think of before, or it's going to go out to somebody else and they're going to start playing with it maybe in a way that you didn't intend it to be used, and they're going to come back and be like, hey, I've got all of these ideas and all these features, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't really think about that application being used that way. Noel is asking a question. Do you see a future where video directors are redundant? Please say no.
I really don't. I mean, I've actually recently had a few jobs try and build a system around no video director, and it's kind of scared me. I'm like, what are you doing? We're not going to timeline a show that way. People are trying to cut corners and do it. To me, it's a vital part of any show, a video director. I mean, even coming from directing linear content back in the day, that person's one of the most vital people on the job. I don't know why you would get rid of them. Yes, you could. Yeah,
you have to be able to put something together. It's like taking the orchestrator away from an orchestra.
Yeah.
Or the conductor away from an orchestra. You're not you're not going to have the same result.
Yeah, I mean, like just how Max is like the guru of what I've been doing in all these projects. I think the video director in a lot of shows is the kind of the meeting point of every department that goes through it, you know. So nope, I think they're going to stay.
So Isabel was asking about not necessarily redundancy, but in sync.
In sync in what sense? What, my app?
I'm guessing possibly with the technology or with the content as things go, because like I know for me, when in some of the things that I was working on and have been working on is exploring the ideas of having a generative content system, kind of having its own, I'm not going to say like AI backing, but be able to do gestures and actions to be able to trigger different types of media to happen at different times. So kind of like analyze an audience, for example, and if they bring out, you know, a stack of lighters and they're waving them in the air, be able to trigger different emotion or different content based off of the moods and things happening within the audience.
I like to build redundancy on a much simpler level. Like, you know, if you're doing stuff with OSC and it's sending a lot of network data, always have a backup. Have a backup that doesn't require network data, you know. Like on the Dave Britt Awards show, we had a video that we could cut to if the tracking was lost, but the video was recorded from the data. So, you know, you always have a way out. Got to build it in.
Yeah. Again, just kind of working out the roadmap and working out how everything is going to work and come together. I think Berto was mentioning dynamic time warp is what it's called.
Dynamic time warp, that's a good title.
I like that too. Let's do the dynamic time warp again.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
You don't look scared at all.
Last Friday night. Yeah, that was an exploration for sure. Gesture recognition, no doubt.
Yeah, let's all control shows with Leap Motions.
Well, Lewis, I'd like to thank you again, man, for coming on board. It's been actually a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you being a good sport and sharing all this amazing information with everybody.
No worries, it's been fun.
But everybody, again, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be again live next week, same bat time, same bat channel. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you again all next week.
Cool. Cheers.
Cheers.